Good evening, Mr. Mark 60. Happy Friday to everybody out there. Thanks for joining me. Should you happen to be viewing this video. The date is June the 11th, 2021, and as promised, I have in my possession a couple of pieces of literature, and it of course deals with racism, white supremacy. I told you that I would be discussing this subject matter a lot and quite often in an effort to bring a ample amount of enlightenment and knowledge, information, empowerment, all of those adjectives that describe what our community needs in order to deal with what besets us in terms of the system of racism, white supremacy. I also mentioned to you that Fracis Cress Welsing is a mentor of mine, and I read and follow her definition of racism, white supremacy to the letter. And I have been trying to find her exact quote on what racism, white supremacy is, how it works. And to this day, no one has refuted her definition. You have a lot of thinkers and talking heads and academics and authors, lecturers. You have a lot of people on YouTube and around the world who occasionally will come out and say, this is white supremacy, or this is what white supremacy looks like. They have their own twist on it. The problem is that they are not really getting to the heart of the matter. What is the heart of the matter? The heart of the matter is this. Racism, white supremacy is structured and put in place for the sole purpose of white genetic survival. No one will say that the way Fracis Cress Welsing will say it. No one will define it as clearly as Dr. Fracis Welsing will define it. And so they miss the mark, either willfully or ignorantly. Either way, they don't get to the bottom of the matter, and therefore white supremacy racism persists. Give me a moment. I want to see if I can find that explanation for you and read it verbatim. Give me 1 second. Let me see here. Let me just kind of... I do believe we're back. As I was saying, I found Dr. Welsing's definition, and I'd like to read it to you. I went to Wikipedia, and some of you may be familiar with her work, some of you may not. But I want to bring this to you just briefly so that we get a context for what we mean by racism, white supremacy. No one else has defined racism, white supremacy in depth the way she has. And in her book, The ISIS Papers, she described white people as the genetically defective descendants of albino mutants. She wrote that due to this defective mutation, they may have been forcibly expelled from Africa, among other possibilities. Racism, in the views of Welsing, is a conspiracy to ensure white genetic survival. She attributed AIDS and addiction to crack cocaine and other substances to chemical and biological warfare by white people. Welsing's created a definition of racism, which is her theory of non-white genetic or global genocide. She referred to racism and white supremacy synonymously. Her definition was racism, white supremacy is the local and global power system dynamic. Get this now, because she's not talking about just systemic. She's going beyond systemic racism. She's saying this is local and global system dynamic, structured and maintained by those who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined. She says this system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, get this, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And I would add another for 10, health, healthcare. Racism, white supremacy is there too. And I think a lot of you are quite aware of our suspicion of the medical community. Let's keep going. The ultimate purpose of the system is to ensure white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth. Now that may sound far out to some and a little far-fetched and stretching things a little bit to some others. However, if you think about it, what would make a people, a small, tiny white minority on the planet, try so desperately to get rid of the black melanin or melanated people? Only the black can displace the white genetic recessive genotype. Think about it. If enough white and black people made it, white would disappear. Because we have that particular strength in our genes and have always had it, it has been a subconscious or conscious fear for many white people on planet Earth. Let's keep going. So the ultimate purpose of this evil system is to ensure white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth, a planet in which the overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, black, brown, red, and yellow by white-skinned people. Okay? So they're the only people on the planet that have no ability to produce anything other than white genetic skin coloration. So she says, in conclusion, all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. Welsing was against white supremacy and what she saw as the emasculation of black men. And no one will come on TV or any other media and define racism, white supremacy the way she does for that reason, white genetic survival. These people are fighting for survival, and if you were in place of these people, you would do the same thing that they're doing. They have to do everything they can to ensure their genetic survival, including mating with anything other than black people. Let me go on. The reason I wanted to present this series on racism, white supremacy is because it is so clear, so concise, and I wanted to present it again because years ago, I read this information, and I think years ago a lot of you out there knew about this information, but I think we tend to forget that what she is saying is that if you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. And I thought about that because it's true. When we forget this very statement, we forget that everything we do in all areas of human activity, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, right? Education and entertainment, economics, and health is impacted by the global structural system of racism, white supremacy. It is everywhere within all of those human activity systems. And if we forget that what she is saying is that you can trace every problem on the planet to that particular sickness, that particular global dynamic, we forget that this is what's causing the problem. You see, we start looking around for all kinds of other reasons for why we are so marginalized. We are so undervalued and underestimated. We keep forgetting this one definition, that this is happening to us in particular, and other people of color, I would go on to say, but mostly the darkest people on the planet, because of this white genetic survival. There is no other explanation for it. There is no other reason that we would be so attacked all the time, 24/7. Let me illustrate a little further some thoughts I had while I was sitting at my desk at work. And And I thought to myself, we must understand what the major cause of black people's problems are. We must understand what is keeping ourselves in this self-destructive condition. And I thought we must fully understand what is keeping, let me put it this way, we must fully understand how the system is working before we can eliminate it from the planet and replace it with justice, according to Neely Fuller. Once we understand the problem, the answer to what to do will be obvious. It's like anything else. If you understand why something is happening, then you know how to get out of the way. Nobody has to tell you, hey, get out of the way. You understand that if you are under attack, you get out of the way. That's exactly what you do. Give me a minute here. Give me 1 second. As I was saying, brothers and sisters, the problem is that we continue to fail to understand what racism is, what white supremacy is, how it works in all these areas of human activity that we mentioned before. We tend to find or get diverted into looking in every other direction but at the system and structure itself. We keep making excuses. We come up with reasons that black people suffer in all of these areas of human activity, such as healthcare, such as entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, health. All these areas you will find something going on in a negative manner with our people. And we keep looking around asking, what's the problem? Well, it's that problem. Well, why aren't they employed? Well, they're just not looking hard enough. Or why are they killing each other? Listen, what Neely Fuller and Dr. Fracis Welsing keeps trying to make you understand is this. While it may be true that we do have agency if we would get codified in terms of our behavior and our thinking, yes, that's true. But what we need to understand is what's causing us not to be these things. What's causing us to be backwards. Once we understand what the cause is, we stop looking around for other causes. We stop blaming each other and ourselves for something that keeps coming at us that is so invisible, so insidious, so clever, so evil in its structure. Look at it this way. I made this note to myself. I said the structure of white supremacy racism supports the system of racism white supremacy. The system of racism white supremacy supports the culture that is racism white supremacy. The culture is everything that the people do in all of the 10 areas of human activity. Now, you are either perpetrating white supremacy or you are subject or victimized by it. White supremacy racism, as we said before, is structured and maintained for the sole purpose of preventing white genetic annihilation. And when you think about it, you must ask yourself, if I were under threat of annihilation, what would I do? What would I have to do in order not to disappear from the planet? And that's the way you must approach this global system dynamic called racism white supremacy. It's not about white people hating black people. Get your minds off that if that's the first place your mind goes. Forget about the people aspect of it in that way. This is a global system structure that you must think in terms of definition. For white genetic survival, these people, those that practice this white supremacy, are not playing. They are worried, scared, subconsciously, consciously, depends on the person, but Trust me, it's there. According to Dr. Welsing and Neely Fuller. They both are telling us every time you look around and say, what's going on with black people? The first thing you need to think to yourself is racism, white supremacy. In all of the areas, or 9 or 10 areas of human activity. If you're looking at law and you see our sentence structure unfairly balanced in favor of white against black, racism, white supremacy in law. If you look around at healthcare and you see that we have the worst statistics, first thing you need to think, racism, white supremacy in healthcare. Wherever you see the problem, you see us at the bottom, it's always the same culprit. But because we get diverted into looking at other reasons, we never look at the structure that they have been telling us for 30 years is the problem. And this is why she says if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. And brothers and sisters, we are very confused, but we are purposely kept confused. That's the cleverness of the structure. That's the cleverness of the system. It's designed to keep you confused. You're not supposed to look at that structure. You're not supposed to put that under a microscope. You never see white people truly examining white supremacy, racism as a global system structure dynamic. Never do you get that explanation. It's always something else. And I'm saying, and bringing this up over and over again, because until we get that in our brains, we will never change our behavior, which mitigates or makes less severe, which counters the effect of racism, white supremacy on us. You see, that's how we fight it. That's how we win. That's how we eliminate it. We change the way we respond to this global system dynamic. That's the point we're trying to get to. That's the point Dr. Welsing, that's the point that Neely Fuller Jr. has been trying to get to for the last 30 or so odd years. It is us who need to change our behavior in terms of codifying ourselves. And I have his book in front of me, the compensatory, United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. It's a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. It's very thoughtfully written, and he has some actual action steps that bring us closer and closer to eliminating racism, white supremacy, or at the very least, eliminating its effect on us. But we must do it strategically, carefully, thoughtfully. It's everywhere present that racism, white supremacy is. It's everywhere present in our thoughts, in our speech, in our actions. The same way white supremacy uses thought, speech, action as a system-type government. And it is a government. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a system called racism, white supremacy. That's another confused definition that we must get straight. This is not a democracy. We live, according to Dr. Welsing, in a system of racism, white supremacy. Neely Fuller has already stated in this book that you cannot have democracy and racism, white supremacy at the same time. In other words, you don't have a little racism over here and none over here. If you got it here, it's everywhere. That's the point you need to understand. It's in the structure. It is not someplace, that place, and not somewhere else. That's not how it works, which is why we keep failing to understand. Every time we see it, we don't know what we're looking at. We think we're looking at somebody not liking us, or somebody hating us, or some skinheads, or some other nonsense that these talking heads keep coming up with. No one has defined racism, white supremacy as a global system dynamic the way Dr. Fracis Cress Welsing has defined it for us. And we thank God for her, because once we get this in our brain computers, we will begin to codify our thoughts, our speech, our actions, and begin right thinking, correct behavior patterns so that we might eliminate this global evil system, and we will never have to lift a gun. We are in a war, but we don't fight a war with the weapons of the enemy. We fight a war of this nature in our thoughts, our speech, in our actions, in our codified behavior. We get smart. We get wise. We understand the war that we in. It's like any other game of competition. It's like any other race of competition. Once you understand the rules, now you can play. Now you can play smartly. This is the reason for the book that I have before me. This is the reason we will be going through this book in all the areas of human activity. He breaks it down into labor, law, politics, religion, sex, economics, entertainment, health. He breaks it all down and he shows us how in the areas of economics, how we are to codify our behavior and our speech. In the area of entertainment, how we are to codify, you understand? Our speech, our action, our thought. He breaks down all the areas of human activity so that we might codify in those areas right thinking, right action. Let me pause for a minute because I want to get to a section of his book as well as a section of another book that I have before me that I haven't mentioned. Give me 1 second. Let me pause and come back. Mr. Mark 60, stay tuned. I'm Mr. Mark 60. We're going to go on to part 2. We're going to stop here because I want these videos to be short. I want to gather my thoughts, gather my notes, and we're going to do a part 2 on racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Mr. Mark 60, please subscribe, like the page. Join me next time. Until then, stay woke. Peace.